All right. I actually had the music on today. Oftentimes I turn it off. I turn off, mute it, make things easier. But today I had it on, and the horn got me. The horn got me. Well, we're back. Happy. Oh, today's Friday. I'm recording this, back for part two. I was thinking about other things I could do and blah 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 bloopy blue. But I thought, you know what? Let's just try to keep motoring on with our task at hand, which is answering that question of what do you need to start a campaign? Oh, I went dark all of a sudden. Hold on a second. Turn on a light. Let's get in some light. There we go. Okay. I'm not exactly sure where we left off. We talked about characters. I mentioned my renewed enthusiasm is not the right word. My renewed appreciation for simple D6, six tables with six choices. I was just looking at the wilderness under volume 3 of the Little Brown Books, Underground and Wilderness, just to see if they had any interesting generators, tables. I just want something simple. What is this? Basic wilderness wandering monsters, basic animals, optional woods, optional, lots of optionals. It's kind of funny. The basic animals are first three are spiders, centipedes. I guess they are basic. I mean, I don't know if I call them really animals. I was looking for about the castle stuff, because we get this great stuff about castles and things, but we don't really get. I don't think we get a sense of how often they suggest there is a castle or something. All right, it's not a big deal. I was just kind of curious. Outdoor survival. This is where they have that famous slash infamous. Where is it? There it is. It's on this page. Call out to, hey, get this other game. Get outdoor survival and use that. Okay. Enough of that. Enough of that nonsense, because I got a pretty hard stop, so I can't get too sidetracked. Well, I can always get sidetracked. I'm gonna try to keep it. Good try to stay on target. We're gonna stay on target. All right. We talked about the setting. I think when you're starting a campaign, and probably I would say number one, which I didn't really talk about, and it was a mistake not to talk about it, but probably the first thing you should do, kind of the first thing, is make a campaign pitch. Which is, if you think about the elevator pitches is a term that comes up a bunch. If you think about movies, TV shows, media, books, there's usually a blurb on the back of a book or on a movie, not a movie poster. That's something a little bit different, but a little bit of something that you could use to try to. The elevator pitch part comes from, if you're in Hollywood and you're a writer, somebody with your great idea, you've written this script, you think it's amazing, and you get 30 seconds with a producer in an elevator. What would you say your movie? So it's coming up with this shorthand of, oh, hey, my movie is Jaws in space. You could say, well, that's Alien, right? Alien is, and granted, this is not to get in the weeds of, well, Alien's not like Jaws because of X, Y, Z, A, B, C. Well, of course they're different, but the concept is to get a quick something so that somebody who is obviously maybe unsure, maybe piques their interest, but gives them a good idea of what it is. And that's where you get oftentimes he's like, this meets that in this different locale. It's this movie meets that movie in here, or it's a high concept, whatever. So the reason why I bring up the campaign pitch is because, and going through this whole exercise, which seems like just another deviation, but I assure you it is not, is that it can be a real bummer to a prospective GM, whether they're new, old, whatever. If you go and put a whole bunch of work into creating, however much work we're putting in here, maybe more, putting into setting up this campaign. Hey, what do I need to get started with this campaign? Okay, I'm doing all this stuff. And then you go around pitching it and you can't get anybody to play. None of your friend group are interested. You post it on LFG, you tack a note or a card up at your friendly local gaming store, and you get no takers, and it feels feel like a kind of like a kick in the groin, good old fashioned kick in the groin, because you put your heart, you put your soul into this thing, and then it didn't go anywhere, and you put in work, right? Maybe most importantly, you put in a bunch of work, gotten yourself really into it, and then nobody bites. You want to save yourself. You want to save yourself that, and coming up with the campaign pitch, which is just going to basically, what color can I use for this? It's going to, do we have a light blue? I guess it's already white. It's going to basically take some bit about your setting. It's going to take some bit about your characters. It's going to take a little bit about your locations. It's going to take some bit about your scheme, what's going on, and it's going to make a pitch, a statement, something to hopefully entice. I mean, it's, you're not a salesperson. I mean, you kind of are. If you're a GM trying to start a new game, you sort of have to put on these different hats. Organizational hat often, and at least at the beginning, the salesman hat. Yeah, you need people to want to play. Some folks are up for anything. If you have a gaming group, oftentimes like, yeah, let's just do it. Let's do it. But what is that pitch? But what you want to do is you want to make that pitch. Obviously, you have to think a little bit about your setting and what kind of game, because you might say, okay, we're playing. If you were pitching a Star Wars type game, hey, we're playing sort of a sci fantasy game with a mix, high concept, good versus big evil, with some spaceships and different planets. I don't know if that's going to, but something like that, right? We're playing a high concept science fantasy game that takes place in a galaxy far, far away, and there's going to be a big good and a big evil, and folks who maneuver in between, sort of thing. And there's a big, cosmic war. Against the backdrop of a cosmic war, these things are happening. These knights of old who wield a magical force against their opposites who are full of evil, something like that. But you don't want it to be too long, and you don't want to put a whole bunch of work into it. But you want it to be representative of what the game is, because if people sign up for that, then that's what you should be attempting as a group to deliver. So you need to see, it can't be necessarily the very first thing you do, because you have to come up with these other things. But you should probably at some point stop. You should make a note. Stop when you've got just the very, very basic stuff. Then put together your pitch, and then pitch it. And then don't start doing more of this stuff until you've kind of confirmed that you've got people for it. And this just avoids, again, that kind of heartache situation of putting a whole bunch of work into a campaign, and then you don't get people joining. Other people are maybe not as enthusiastic for it as you are. Save yourself that trouble up front, because maybe you can always, because remember, with this kind of campaign pitch, when you have these very basics, very easy to change. If people are like, wow, I'm really digging this idea of these knights of old, blah blah blah, but I don't know, I'm not really digging the science fiction part of it. Can we just do this fantasy wise? And you could say, hey, yeah, absolutely. If a couple few people get, let me get feedback, and I can absolutely do that. Right? Okay, great. There are several people of the people who are really interested, but they're not interested in the sci-fi aspect. We'll dump the sci-fi aspect. That's fine. But if I've already gone through and I've created Hoth, Tatooine, Dantooine, and all this stuff, and I've generated spaceships and all these things, that, I'm not going to want to get rid of them, because I put a bunch of energy, and I think a lot of my interest is now tied up in this stuff. So, do the campaign pitch first. So I should probably just write that in. Short, no more than a paragraph. Long, expresses the overall idea of the campaign, including the setting, maybe locations, or at least one or more locations. Hey, Rob. Rob says it's easy to lean on the system you're going to use instead of this pitch, and that is probably a mistake. Yes, I would agree with that, for multiple reasons. The first being, what you end up making may diverge more or less from the system. If you say someone, yeah, let's play D&D 5e. It's kind of, it might actually be nebulous what that means, right? Even with OSR, you ask people what an OSR game is to them, and you get some really, there's a whole spectrum of ideas. So if I just go into a server and say, hey, I'm setting up an OSR game, what does that mean? What does that mean to each player? Same thing, Traveler. What does that mean? Some people are really, oh, this part of Traveler is what I'm into. Oh, this part. So you want to be specific. Be specific, because what you want to explore may be different than what they want to explore. Probably is on some level, and those may deviate on either side of this game of telephone we're playing with just the name of the system. Right. And then you might decide that the system, the other thing too, is if I just say, hey, I want to play this game and do this or that, and you're interested, great. If I don't include the system in there, then I might, as I'm going through the stuff, I might realize, oh, I was going to use, let's say I started like, I was gonna use this system, but I'm thinking about it, maybe this other system's a better fit. And I haven't sold people on the system yet. So maybe there's a little bit more wiggle room. Whereas if I sign everybody up saying, hey, you're all gonna play Pendragon, and then I said, oh man, I really should use, I don't know, Rune Quest, or that's pretty similar, I think, in terms of whatever. Maybe, oh no, I should use Pathfinder instead, Pathfinder 2. Then you might get a whole bunch of people going, well, I didn't sign up for it. But not that including the system is wrong. At this level, I'm talking about pretty much mostly system agnostic stuff. Though if your system you're using has hooks to help you with these things, like Worlds Without Number or Karen, a bunch of them do, that's fine too. But yeah, you wanna try to nail down your pitch, as much as possible to what you're actually doing, and not just rely on the system to sell it. So look, there are times. I mean, I'll say this just to take play devil's advocate to myself. I've definitely been in situations, especially in cons and things, where I've chosen to play in a game because of the system. Oh, this is a more board game. Great, I'm in, because I want to play more board game. I almost don't care what the pitch of the actual game is. I mean, I'll give it a look just to make sure it's not something that really deviates wildly from what I want to play. But other than that, it's like, oh, you're playing more board, great, I'm in. Or there's one, I think, Honey Heist. I saw the Honey Heist, and I don't even remember if they pitched the scenario or just Honey Heist. But I was like, Honey Heist, I'd heard great things about Honey Heist, I'm in. I don't care. We'll figure it out as we go. But for a campaign that's yours and not kind of a single sort of one shot sort of dealio, yeah, figure out your stuff. Don't just say, oh yeah, we're playing 5e or whatever. You know. Okay, so let's see. Expresses the overall idea of the campaign, including the setting, locations, um, generally who the characters are. Your pirates, your adventurers, your freebooters, your soldiers, whoever you are. You're anybody. You're the man of the people. Hey, Magnus. I'll say settings, locations, generals, and yeah, maybe factions. Probably good. Like pretty much all these 3, 4 things should all come in, but very brief. You just want to be brief. And like I said, this is just to save you from going down things and that don't end up working in terms of being not a purple. Oh, good purple. So that's all that is. Okay. So we figured that out. The characters, we're being just very general, right? People are going to create their own characters, whatever. But if you have a generally, who are they? Who are they? What are they doing? The classic is their adventurers, just looking for treasure, right? You're the zero to hero. You're a zero. We're not good enough or well suited to do whatever other things are going on in the setting. So you've taken to the roads, trying to hopes to lead you to treasure. Yeah, that's kind of your classic D&D sort of thing. But it doesn't have to be. Oftentimes you play games where maybe you end up but you might start off as soldiers or mercenaries or students or wizards at a wizarding high school, whatever it is. There can be any number of things. You're mercenaries. You're part of a thieves guild. You're whatever, right? Part of a small noble house. So whatever you are, that's going to hear, and that's where that kind of backgrounds come in. I'm not talking about backgrounds in terms of writing out some big story, but just an idea of, okay, who are you? And it could be something that each person can have their own, or you could say it's a group. Hey, you're all veterans of a lost war, right? Okay, great. I mean, that's pretty much the A team. You're the A team. They were Vietnam. They were a unit that was in Vietnam, and they were accused of war crimes they did not commit, and now they're on the run, and they're also doing justice while they're running and trying to prove their innocence. I mean, that's the A team. So and of course they all had their own quirks, but they all had that one particular background that helped sort of set the stage for everything else. It can be that, or it can just be a quirk that the party can play with in terms of getting their footing. You can run it any way you'd like. Okay, let's move on to locations. So I'm thinking of a few different ones. So I'm thinking of that we have some types, right? Types of locations. We have a refuge, we've got lairs, we've got and dungeons, any kind of dangerous location, but with treasure reward, kind of an adventuring, or maybe I should call it adventuring location. I don't know, aka the dungeon. I think those are the main ones you could use. So a refuge, basically, uh, Rob says wastelands. Yeah, that's more of a terrain type, I think. Because I think any of these could be in a wastelands. You could have. You think of Mad Max, all those little fortified, like in the Road Warrior, right? Road Warrior or Mad Max, which is the one where he's actually in the post. I know they're both kind of post-apocalypse futures. Whichever one that he's fighting, was it Toe Cutter? No, that Toe Cutter's in. I guess it's the Road Warrior, right? Mad Max, it's Toe Cutter. Road Warrior is when there's he's the little kid with the bladed boomerang. That's gonna make me look it up. In any case, that you can have a refuge in a wasteland, right? All kinds of things. All this stuff could be in a wasteland. So I look at wasteland as sort of your. I think they call depending on edition, you might hear barrens is another term. But yes, Ryan asked if we're talking Mad Max. Well, just as an aside, because Rob mentioned wastelands. But I'm thinking of three sorts of locations generally. Refuge, and I guess I'll make nest that in there. No, not that one. There we go. Refuge. This is a place that folks can rest and resupply. Where? That's a refuge. Oops. We've got let's see, a lair. Place where one or more. I suppose I'll say a secret place where a creature or faction resides. And then we got a adventuring little spot of the dungeon. Adventuring location is a terrible word, but it doesn't have to be a dungeon. It doesn't even have to be. It can be kind of anything, but it's a. Let me see. A dangerous place to be explored and exploited for rewards. That's a pretty good. I actually kind of like that. A dangerous place to be explored and exploited for rewards. So it could be anything, and you could set up things. You could set it. Yeah, I'm stumbling over myself. You can have situations in which one of these is inside another one. A lair can be inside the adventuring location. The adventuring location can be inside the refuge. In other words, thinking about Waterdeep, and they've got what the Underdark or Undermountain is underneath there, right? Okay, so the dungeon is actually underneath the city, and you could do that. I think it's probably easiest and simplest, and I think it engages some elements if you want them when there's some separation, but there doesn't have to be. You can have like in Caverns of Thracia, where essentially, again, I think like I mentioned in the other stream, I think it's either implied or it's explicitly stated. There's a village right here, and getting from the village to the caverns is like no big deal. So in terms of, there's not any danger in getting from the town to the caverns, or the village to the caverns. So, which means that how far away from each other doesn't really enter it. Now, it could, as you're playing the game, it's going along and things are happening, that could become a thing. The idea is they're basically in the same places. It's once you escape from the caverns, then you're basically in this refuge area. But I think it. But I also kind of like, which me personally, having a little distance that kind of keep on the borderlands. You're not far away. You're in the same hex, but still, it's maybe an hour or so finding it, maybe a couple of hours, and then it just sets up some. I think it just sets up some interesting, fun elements that when you remove that are gone. But you maybe add some other in, because obviously if you playing the Caverns of Thracia and you tick somebody off and they decide to follow you out of the dungeon into the village, well, that sets up all kinds of fun stuff too. Because as easy as you can find them, it's as easy for them to find you, sort of thing. And this is just some kind of long in the tooth cappuccino coffee. At this point, it just looks like coffee with milk, but I did make it as a cappuccino. It's lukewarm. I'm going to switch to water, or maybe I'll go back and forth with water. The reason why I lay out these three, and I don't know that we even need more of them just categorically. There is someone you could probably put something else in there. I'm sure there's another something, I don't know, like just a resource thing, like, oh, this is just a resource. What do you do here? You use a resource. A place where you use a resource. That's probably be another one. But I'm going to stick with these three for the moment, because I think starting off, this is what you need. And so to add on to there, I think you need one of each. I think it's a good starting spot. One of each. I wonder what happens if you change these colors. Oh, no, I didn't want to change the whole thing. Oh, let's see. If I change that one. Oh, I like that. To start. Hey, Ian. So I think starting off, one of each type of location, i.e., one refuge, one lair, one, I'm just going to call it, and one, I'm going to call it one dungeon. Now, why do I say one? Well, because we're not trying to be super complicated. We're trying to keep things simple. We're trying to keep things on the manageable level. And like I said, if you combine the lair and the dungeon, as in the lair of the Goblin King is on level 3 of this dungeon, then you really down to 2. But I think it's good to think of them at least somewhat separately. Just at least when you're idea shopping, when you're thinking about what you want to do. Because I think it's also interesting if the lair and the dungeon aren't the same. You and another group. So let's say that you're the antagonist that you've come up with, and this, of course, is all feeds in together. So talking about factions, the faction that you're antagonistic towards are antagonistic towards you, or over here, and you guys are both gunning for the same thing. Like two teams of archaeologists trying to first make it to the lost city of Hamanoptera, right? The good guys and the bad guys. And okay, and they're starting from there. They have their headquarters and they're going to this place. You're starting from your headquarters. You're going to that place and you can meet, blah, blah, blah. Maybe the adventure will spill over to you having to steal something from their headquarters. Maybe they're one time going to try to steal something from your headquarters. Maybe they're going to do something. But you have the kind of rule of three thing again. You're setting up these pyramids. You're setting up these kind of pyramid triangle situations where you can bounce things off of each other. Even if you end up deciding to make it that no, the main enemy is the mummy, and so the mummy's lair is where his sarcophagus is, which is within the adventuring location, which is the lost city of Hamanoptera. That's totally fine too. But you could think how these things, and I think we could come up with some examples. It says Lara Croft versus Indiana Jones. Yeah, that's definitely. Oh, that's cool. So I can do another color. What kind of color should I do this one? Dark. Ooh. let's look at something. Let's try some examples. So, we got Keep on the Borderlands, let's say, which has, whoops, Refuge, which is the keep. The dungeon is the caves of chaos. Lair, that is the, I don't know why I'm capping that. Whoops. Lair is the, what do they call it? There's that, shoot, what is it? The temple. Is it temple to elemental chaos or temple to, I don't know, temple to elemental. Is it elemental evil, chaos, whatever. Temple to elemental evil. I'll just call it temple to chaos. The secret temple to chaos. Yeah, so something like Hamlet, the moat house, Hamlet itself, the village would be your refuge. The moat house would be the adventure site kind of dungeon. I don't know if there's not really an antagonist. There's the cultists, but they're from kind of, and I think, yeah, the lair for the cultists, it's kind of interesting. So with Hamlet, and it's been a while, so forgive if I've munged a whole bunch of things together. The village is the actually let's just do it. So we have village of Hamlet, the refuge. I don't know why I put this is the village. Dungeon is the moat house. Lair, which is actually off map, is the Temple of Elemental Evil. Or wherever they're kind of coming from, which is right. Basically continue, the sort of to be continued kind of thing. Because you remember, so if for those of you who may not be aware, because now if you go and you look up Temple of Elemental Evil, there's a huge dungeon, huge book that goes through it. But the originally, the Hamlet came out promising soon to come Temple of Elemental Evil, and it didn't come. It didn't come for years afterwards. So you just ended up with this kind of note of, oh, hey, after this, the party can continue on, I think, towards Verberbonk or whatever, and onwards this other stuff, and it wasn't there. So if you look at the village Hamlet T1, I guess, village of Hamlet kind of by itself, the enemies you're supposed to kind of go for the moat house, and then you follow the road up into the next adventure, which now you can get in Temple of Elemental Evil. But at the time, it's just kind of like, hey, you kind of go up there and stay tuned for part 2. But yeah, of course you had to wait. We had to wait a while. Brian says, I feel like it might be common to have a refuge by day, adventuring site by night, or something like a city that is dangerous at night. Waterdeep. Yes, you can. I mean, there's all kinds of ways you could permutate this stuff, right? This is not meant to be hard and fast. And that I didn't state by purposefully that the refuge can't be dangerous. I think you got to be careful with it. And I usually, especially not to start, right? You want to give, because once you sort of once you bring the mess home, it can be hard. It can be hard if the refuge is not a place of safety anymore because assassins are hunting you and this or that. It can really put the party in a bind, and that can be good. That can be a source of fun, but it can also be a source of kind of frustration because there are realities to the kind of adventure day, having to sleep, all that kind of stuff, and things like if you can't walk around with all your stuff all day. It's kind of the reason why I'm always a little bit wary when the GM's like, oh yeah, when the party leaves, someone's going to go to the inn and steal something from the rooms. It's like, well, yeah, they can, but there's no security there. There's nothing really the party can do. I mean, of course they can. They could leave players, they could leave hirelings behind, blah, blah, blah. But it's a little bit like they don't really have a choice but to be in these kind of unsecure spots. So not that you shouldn't do it, but just like, maybe think about it. Maybe just, yeah, that's certainly one thing that someone could do in a fiction sense, but maybe just look at it and say, okay, because of the way the game is structured, it is a game after all, that maybe instead of doing that, I could do this other thing or whatever. So yes, the refuge, the word implies kind of safety. And I think to start, It can be safe, but the keep has stuff in it that is not necessarily safe, but it's not dangerous off the bat. Of course, you have something like City State of the Invincible Overlord, which can be supremely dangerous. So you got to be careful there. If the refuge, right? We're talking about things kind of in a very generic sense. So the refuge could be a tavern or an inn that or a if you're staying at say a church place. You're staying in a local lord, right? You can shrink it down. It doesn't have to be the whole village. It can be just a thing if you want to. If that helps you to think about it as an actual locale within a location, a small locale within a greater location, and you could totally play around with it. If it's dangerous by day, do night. But we're just starting out, so I think we can kind of that's stuff that you can go in that finishing touches, polishing stuff. If you want to make it more dynamic and everything, like that's great. Well, I also think it's fine to say we'll put the pieces there because, like I said, I've said in the past, and I think I said in the last stream, the party will make all kinds of stuff themselves. They will make enemies. They will take a place that's safe and turn those turn their protectors against them. They will do all that stuff and do it with glee. So we don't necessarily need to plan for that because they'll bring it around. They'll bring it around themselves. Right? So you could start with like, look at this hut, and the farmers will let you stay there, and all this stuff, and then sooner or later the thief has stolen something and the from the farmer, and the fighter's gone in and found where the farmer kept some wine and whatever and drank it all, and then all of a sudden they're all pissed off and having their throats slit in their sleep. You know, so things you can totally do, right? I'm not going to worry about it right now. And I think that's the big thing. It's like if you have time, it's like you finish a test early and you think, okay, I could just head out of class now, or I can check my work, right? If you finished your prep and you're like, hey, we got this kind of starter thing down, but the game's not till tomorrow, and I'm still energized to work on it, and I want to add some fleshing out, then yeah, go for it. Let's see, is there another example? So I'll do the Mummy movie, which I think because that this one highlights a little bit of the. Or actually, I'll do no. What I'll do is Horror on the Hill, which has the let's see, the refuge was it Guido's Keep. Dungeon is basically the hill, and then the lair is the dragon's den below the dungeon. Like I think there's like a Goblin King. There's something going on. I mean, technically, it's kind of the last level of the dungeon, but you could call it separately too, because I think in that module, one of the things I don't really love about it, but I get it, is basically once you get to the dragon, you can't go back. There's some like they put something there like, oh, there's like a big drop or something. You go in some kind of chute or pit or something, and yeah, now you're down now you're down the dragon, and you can't get back. In fact, there's several of those. Once you cross the river, it could be a pain to get back, and then once you kind of get to the top of the hill, let's hope. But then the real one's this, because the if you don't know Horror on the Hill, and I have a read through from ages ago now, I think Guido's Keep, similar to the Keep on the Borderlands, is this keep, but instead, unlike in the Keep in the Borderlands, in which there's no barrier between you and the Caves of Chaos, other than the fact that it's not right there, and you have to kind of find it. There's no physical barrier. On Horror on the Hill, there's a river, and I think it's a pretty wide river. It's not one. I think they made it not feasible to swim, really, to swim it, and of course, whatever around with it. So you have to. There's even, I think, a note that you basically going to have think about in advance, paying somebody to come back and see you, like, oh, drop me off and come back in 2 days or whatever it is, or I think there maybe even be a note about trying to flag down a boat. But basically, once you get over, if you haven't thought about it in advance, it can be really dicey to get back. And then, of course, once you get down to that dragon's den, you're basically trapped down there until you've dealt with the dragon. But just looking at it archetypally, as Brian pointed out, we've got refuge, we got the dungeon, we got the lair. Right, the lair is basically in the dungeon. You have to go through the dungeon to get to the lair. So there you go. So that's kind of all. I think that's kind of all we need. right? We can do those things. We don't. And remember, depending on how much you want to do, I'm not somebody who feels like I need to draw out a whole town. It's you. If you just want to put like what are the highlights of the town, or just write them down. No, whatever you need, or nothing. It's got an adventurers thing. It's got a whatever. That's it. I mean, maybe it's a good thing. I suppose we could kind of get into what we need, what we would want in our refuge. Maybe put another thing. Our refuge checklist. Place to sleep. And it doesn't even have to be. So remember, I'm putting place to sleep. It doesn't have to be an inn. Okay. Place to sleep can be the farmer will let you sleep in the hayfield, will let you pop your tent and do whatever, right? Or sleep in the barn if they have a barn. It doesn't have to be an inn or a tavern or anything. It just got to be somewhere where you could sleep. Because a lot of things are predicated, system dependent and everything on getting good sleep, safe sleep, as opposed to camp sleep. I often will differentiate between, sleep in the wilds with no kind of fire. So you're kind of out in the dark as the worst sort of rest. Second sort of rest is, well, you're out in the wilderness, but you've got a fire. And then the best sort of rest is where you can be somewhere kind of safe. And oftentimes I think about in a bed, but I think also it could just be somewhere where you can let your guard down and be like, okay, I'm resting. Now, if you don't want to make those differentiations, that's totally fine. But you need somewhere to place, as Brian says, food, water, shelter, right? So you need a place to sleep. You need a place to, you need a place to refresh, supplies, and then probably information. Yep, monasteries are good ones. I like those. Yeah, there's all kinds of places, right? Depending on what kind of customs you want to have in your world, there might be a custom of hospitality where local lords, if you can go to local lord and petition for a night's sleep, or just knock on a farmer's door, go to a monastery, you can trade work for shelter. There are all kinds of options. It does not have to be ye old inn, bed and breakfast, fantasy medieval Airbnb. It can be all kinds of things, but you just need to have kind of somewhere. And if you wanted to do something, and here's the thing, like again, in terms of riffing off all these ideas, if you want to do something different, like, oh, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to change the way this works, great, more power to you. But that's not my first, my first thing is I just want to let's just get, I don't know, I wanted to link to you. Spooky Mansion could be one. Yeah, if you wanted the dungeon and the refuge are one and the same. That's a trope or kind of a horror, as Brian mentions, a kind of horror trope, or like an alien. Also, the place you sleep is also where the monster is. That can totally be something you can work with. You can play on this. The what I want to get out of it is you want to be thinking about these. And I don't think, and like I said, I don't you don't need to go crazy. Just get one of each. One place where they can sleep, supply, get information. If you want to split into 3 places, you could do that. You could probably do that too. Like I said, I thought that there's a potential of a 4th type of location, which is essentially your supply place. Where do you go for your resource? You're sort of a resource location. You could totally do that too. I'm kind of merging it into refuge, but it doesn't have to be. Going to the witch's house, that's scary and maybe a bit dangerous, but as a place you get information, you totally could. And I might, and as I tweak this, I might even put that somewhere different, split it up. But hey, Skiffy, this is Ouija. Ouija, WEJE.io. I'll put it in the chat. My whiteboarding app. There we go. Yep, don't have to go crazy. Okay. Do we need a layer checklist? Do we need a layer checklist? Well, we'll start one and we'll see what we need. Well, it leaves the location. What do we need? I don't know if we need. I'm trying to think. What does it need? I suppose it need clues. I'm not sure. I'm not actually sure we need a layer location. I'll put it in there as a placeholder. You guys have ideas. I don't think the layer has to have loot. I think it should have something. So hold on a minute. Let me just finish writing this. So dungeon checklist. Let's see. I think it should have it can have loot or loot, knowledge, control, or power over the residing faction. Something like that. Let's move this down here. I would say maybe this is what I would think about it. Just off the top, kind of off the top of my head. Magnus says, how does the layer presence of a big nasty affect a big beastie? Why do I think nasty? But big nasty works too. A big beastie affect the environment around it? Are there henchmen, lesser creatures that serve tribute the bigger monster? These are all good questions. I'm not sure we need them quite yet. I think, not that they're bad to think about, but I'm really trying to think about this. I think those are good finishing touches, polishing questions. Right. Let's see. Flesh out the dungeon. So I do like them. Or we could do flesh out the dungeon, flesh out the lair. Because I think those questions are great for actually both locations. How does it affect the environment around it? Tab. Oops. Tribute layer. I'll just put layer owner. So yeah, those are good. Thanks, Magnus. I don't know that we again on the kind of keep it simple, because I think right, we're starting a campaign, right? So we're thinking about really part of the starting the campaign to me is just getting the ball rolling on your initial adventure. Because I think a lot of stuff can roll from there. Like the village of Hamlet. You go into Hamlet, you hear about the moat house. Oh yeah, there's some weird sights been seen in the moat house. I don't remember exactly what what the hook is for the moat house, but oh yeah, there's stuff going on at the moat house. You should go check it out. You go there, you the giant frog, you go in, the spider, blah blah. I think there's some cultists in there, whatever. You handle all that, and then you rifle through their stuff, and you get the note saying, "Aha, everything's going according to plan. When you've done this, come back, see me at the Temple of Elemental Evil. Go north, turn left at Verbank, yada yada yada." And you go, "Aha!" So that is kind of all the sort of thing you need. You don't have to follow that exact formula, of course. That is a very common trope, but that's kind of I think the minimum, right? We're looking at the minimum thing you need. What is the minimum to get started? And I think if the minimum to get started doesn't have some of that environmental stuff, I think you're okay. I think you'll still be all right. Is it helpful to have that stuff? Does it add a certain amount of the things we like, the dynamic world and verisimilitude? Take a drink. and whatever else, absolutely. But I wouldn't let that. Those things again. I think think about that stuff when you're finished. You got this whole idea set up, and now you're thinking about like extras. Plug that stuff in, but get this other stuff out first. Get that rough draft out on the paper. If you have a chance, you can come back and clean it up and ask some follow-up questions. And think, oh yeah, whatever. But I think that as great as those are, and as much as I appreciate them, like I want to, it's part of that. Like, do we absolutely need it? And I would say no. Like I think Caverns of Thracia, right? I keep going back to that one, but it's this big mega dungeon, got all kinds of stuff going on. But the surface, other than the fact that there's a little ruins that are right there, you're like, oh, okay, now we should explore and find out where it is. It pretty much has no effect on anything around it. I don't think. I have to go back and read it again, right? But it's just like it's there, and the caves are sort of similar. You kind of get to the caves, they're there, but other than that, there's different set locations kind of in the wilderness, but there's not a whole lot of that interconnectedness between the areas around the caves necessarily and the cave. I think that's something that I have added in when I kind of played my own version of it. I think people do, and I could be mistaken, but I think they're good extras. They're good finishing touches, I would say. But trying to keep it simple, stupid sort of thing. Skiffy says that Keep on the Borderlands didn't even have a hook, as I remember. Yeah, no, I think Keep on the Borderlands, you just start up like you're on the road up to the, you're following up this road, this path that leads up this side of this hill to the keep. Welcome. And then it's just all about you doing ye old, like, let's go talk to the bartender. And I think there might be you can go to the different parts of the keep, and I think different people know things. And there is an agent for the Caves of Chaos, I believe, who's there. But I don't know if they really give you much to do with them. And yeah, eventually I think you just kind of learn enough to say like, oh yeah, there are these caves I could use cleaning out kind of thing. And then you got to find them. So you can get away with a little, right? And because this is for your game, you can keep adding on to it. I mean, that's kind of part of I think the approach that's always helped me, because I run I very much kind of a seat of the pants improv sort of game, is because I try to get a good understanding of this little world I'm building, so that when the players are pulling all these little levers and things, that you kind of get it. Like, oh yeah, when you pull this lever, this is going to happen, because you can visualize in your brain the machine. And when you're running a module, that can be kind of difficult, because you can read it and you got to try to kind of do that. Well, I think when you're building it yourself, it's actually easier, at least easier for me, because you put all the things together. You built the whole machine. You're not just reading the manual about how the machine works. You built the machine. So and you can keep adding to it, because the idea here is, I just want to get, this to me is, hey, get your game off the ground. Doesn't mean you stop. It doesn't mean that, okay, I've prepped for session 1 where I did, or session 0, whatever, where I did this stuff, and now I shall never prep again. Never prep again. You can keep coming back and adding to it, because by the time you do session 0, let's say, where you've kind of laid out the simplest things, you've already set up your pitch and that's scored. You got your game. In session 0, they're creating their characters and doing that. That whole time they're doing this stuff, however long that takes, like, I'm going to get ideas. They're going to start coming up with stuff. And that's definitely going to affect some of these things I have, so that the next session, now there's a little bit more. Maybe they start asking questions like, oh, okay, there's supposed to be ancient ruins near here. Do we see any old roads or anything that might, yeah, I didn't think about that, but that totally makes sense, because I had decided that this refuge, this location, this town village they're at, was built on top of an older town village. And so, yeah, it makes sense that this ancient temple complex that was where they're going to would totally have roads connecting it to whatever, right? Oh, okay, great. Right. All that kind of stuff. So we're going to be building off of this. This is not the end. This is the beginning. And it's not even the beginning of the end. Maybe if you got this stuff, it'd be the end of the beginning. I'm not sure. All right. So we got some examples. Dungeon checklist. So I think the lair, and I don't know, I'll have to rework this. I feel like if it's a lair, not a lair should be more, I think it should be more than just where they sleep. A lair should be more than just a sleeping place. It is the center of power, the headquarters, the refuge, yeah. Maybe sanctuary. The sanctuary of the creature or faction. Right? A lair should be more than just the sleeping place. It's not just, oh, this is where these guys come to lay their heads at night. And that's why I think about, okay, it can have loot. Sure, it can have loot. Why not? But that might not be their thing. It should have, I think, some knowledge. It's just something, it should have something that is valuable. Should have, maybe there's a better way. Should have things of value and or power of and over the creature or faction. If you think about, well, we have these cultists. Okay. If you find the cultist campsite, yeah, you'll find some sleeping bags. Maybe you'll find something, remains of a campfire, what they had for dinner, a hole filled with their poop that they did a poor job covering up. That's not their lair. That's just this place where they were. But when you find out the secret place where they've actually been operating from, then that's where you find the letters to their superiors. Maybe you find some extra uniforms. You find some rite that they've RITE that they have written down somewhere. Things. It should be something that is important to them. It gives you, it's stuff that's valuable to them, and it might give you power or over them. And information is a way of power. It could literally give you something like, oh my gosh, this is where the whoops, drop my glasses. This is where the amulet that controls X, Y, or Z is from. Blah blah blah. Right? Should be a thing, something of power. That's kind of what separates a layer from just a sleeping spot. But what that can be could be more than one thing. If you want to just have just treasure like money, sure, because money can be as a resource for a faction as much as a resource for anybody else, for characters. So that absolutely could be something. But then you can think, you don't have to limit your thinking to money. Think about if you're fighting chaos cultists, what are the things that are powerful and important to them? That's the kind of stuff they're going to be in their lair. And of course, relatively speaking, if you're only fighting a really small, a small sect arm of this cult, they're not going to have their thing of the thing that's the most powerful artifact hidden there. The thigh of Orcus isn't going to be hidden in that spot, but there might be a small thing, a clue, something bigger that they wouldn't want you to have. That's the stuff that's going to be in their lair. And then in terms of the dungeon, it should be dangerous. Should have rewards. I think that's about it, really. Dangerous, risky. Dangerous or riskiness can take any number of forms. At this level, this point, I don't care. Right? It could be environmental stuff. It could be all traps and trickery and things, and no creatures at all, or it could be all creatures and no traps and trickery, or of course some combination. It can be a dungeon. It could be a swamp. It can be a tower. It can be someone's house. It could be the haunted castle. It can be whatever, a graveyard. Really doesn't matter. 5 rooms, no more, no less. The 5-room, the 5-room concept's interesting, and I know folks go back and forth on that. I think it's interesting conceptually. I don't build a dungeon that way. And I think it also, if you're taking a very narrative approach to your dungeons, I think it works better. And in the OSR space, we don't tend to, because we like to think about people coming and going and just doing things. But I think it can be, I think there is some value into looking at it that way, at least a little bit. I mean, depending on your approach. I'm not saying you have to. I know you're just goofing, but I think it is a fair point. Or it is a fair thing, because a lot of people, and I've done videos on the 5-room dungeon. Like I said, I think there's some value there, but you have to use care, because in this sort of OSR, if you're playing an OSR type game in an OSR type framework, you're not going through a dungeon narratively. So the idea of building your dungeon as like a story arc where you go this and you kind of do these sort of almost a 3-act structure to a dungeon doesn't really work. But I do appreciate trying to think about, in some ways, what different elements of a dungeon are doing, because I think it can be worthwhile to look at it beyond just what it is in the fiction. Like, okay, this is, in terms of just kind of the creating part. Like if I took it and say, okay, we've got the sort of the goal, the reward, or the whatever is over here, and we got this kind of traps. This area is all going to be about traps, and that's kind of going to be this. And we're going to have this over. Like I think there's some value to being able to look at your dungeon like that a bit, but I think, like I said, you have to look at it. You have to. I think it's a nice tool as part of the ideation process, but I wouldn't follow it. I wouldn't follow it by the letter, at least not for to kind of yield OSR game. But I mean, plenty of people have. I guess it really is a style thing. I guess at the end of the day, but that does help you. And this whole bit is about trying to get things done quickly. And if something like 5-room dungeon gets you on the board quickly and it lets you rough out a dungeon, then by all means use it. And don't worry about people telling you it's not really OSR, it's not old school, or it's not this, or it's not that. It doesn't matter, because all that matters is what the final product is, and whatever gets you to that product, which is just playing a game with your friends around a table, then use it, because you can always use that to kind of get the skeleton of a place out and then rejigger it, tweak it, do whatever, right? But in terms of just what your dungeon should have, dangers and risks and rewards. And there's other things that I think you can maybe have. Like you might say, what about secrets? Should all dungeons have secrets? Maybe. But I don't care about that right here. If your first dungeon doesn't have a secret spot, that's fine. I don't think there's any formula. It could have tons of secrets. It could have no secrets. Everything could be completely obvious. The danger could come from elsewhere. So I don't know that we need. I don't know anything we need anything else there. Let's see, what else can we flesh out here? So I got a hard stop in about 10 minutes. So what else can we look at in the time we have left? We have the scheming part. We got the factions, their goals. I guess, maybe so. Let me could break down a little bit of what a scheme. What is a scheme? Oops. Well, we can go. No, we'll just keep it. We'll keep that. What is a scheme? All right, so let's look at a kind of a scheme. A scheme is a plot by a faction with the goal of increasing its powers or resources. Brian says the scheme is a timeline of what the bad guys will do if uninterrupted. Yeah, I think that's not a bad way of looking at it at all. So there's a scheme. Now we want to make sure our factions are right. I don't know if it's much use. I'm trying to think about it. I don't know if I want to make it a hard and fast rule, but part of the idea here with the scheme is that it's opposed. So maybe you have the scheme. How is this scheme opposed by the other faction? Maybe we should actually let me put some more blanks in here. So what does the faction need to do to complete its scheme? Write out the goals. Or maybe write out the steps. I don't know. This I feel like this part's the most opaque part of it. Basically, the scheme, the situation is you enter in the situation, the party. You're putting the party in the situation. You're going to have, in general, and I'm just going to make a broad statement for kind of newer folks, and you can feel free to do different things with your group, whatever. But you want to have probably one faction is going to be more or less positive and one that's kind of negative. You can have multiple if you want to run something where you're doing like an evil campaign with two evil organizations, or you have two evil organizations and the good guy. You can do tons of things. But I think the easiest one, it's the most traditional one, is you have a good faction and a bad faction, and you can go crazy with into the weeds and the shades of gray area. But just be kind of, let's just keep it simple for the moment. You got the good guys, you got the bad guys. And the reason why you're trying to lay out the scheme, so they have this concept from the factions. They may have their overall goals. The scheme could be one of those goals. I'm probably could make a note. Hey, take one of these goals, and that's where you're going to create the scheme from, which probably would be a good idea. Maybe I'll tweak that down, write it down later. But the idea here is the scheme is kind of what is the situation when the party enters the mix, and usually it's a situation that is unresolved, and that, like in. Sorry, there's some truck banging along the road. Like in, let's say, the fistful of dollars, town conflict between two families. Neither family can get over on the other one. Right, they're in this stasis. Enter in the man with no name, and suddenly the stasis gets broken. That's kind of what I'm thinking is just a good general situation. You can tweak it to say like, oh my gosh, the bad guys are on the verge of victory, the good guys are holding out, and they're only able to hold out because of this thing, but whatever. You can play around with what the status is, what the status quo is when the party comes. It could be that one faction is vastly overpowered, but then there's this little resistance that's nice and plucky, and they're hanging on by the skin of their teeth. Or it could be that they're even, whatever that is. The scheme is kind of what is the thing that's going to be sort of happening. Which one of these goals is in play, let's say, when the players enter the story. So if you think of Star Wars, it's the rebel. You have two schemes that are interrelated. The Empire trying to secure or get back the stolen, or prevent the stolen, or I guess maybe look at it from the rebellion. The rebellion is trying to get the stolen Death Star plans from Princess Leia to their headquarters. That's kind of the goal. And of course, the plans end up in the droid, which ends up with Luke Skywalker, who would be like our player. And like, okay, now what do you got to do? We got to try to do this or that. Okay, great. And then, of course, the Empire's trying to stop them. And then you think, well, how are they trying to stop them? They've got Star Destroyers, they've got Stormtroopers, they've got Vader, all that stuff in play. So the scheme for A New Hope is the rebellion trying to move the plans to Princess Leia, and then obviously destroy the Death Star. So you can even say the scheme is to destroy the Death Star, and that's going to be done by analyzing these plans we have to get back first. So destroy the Death Star. So I guess that's probably let me backtrack. Let me do this again. A New Hope. The scheme is, and I'll let me put I'll throw this in here as an example. And I'm doing this off the top of my head, so cut me some slack if I gotta. All right, scheme example. Star Wars scheme rebellions scheme. Destroy the Death Star. Steps. Get plans to Death Star. Actually, let me hold on. Let's cut that out. Tap that in. Get plans to Death Star. Or I guess I say steal. Analyze the plans to find weakness. Launch attack to exploit weakness. All right, so we got Star Wars. The rebellion scheme is to destroy the Death Star. Their steps are to steal the plans of the Death Star, analyze the plans to find weakness, Would you stop doing that, Ouija? Thank you. A weakness, and then launch attack to exploit that weakness. The Empire opposes this scheme by mobilizing Star Destroyers, Stormtroopers, Troopers, Darth Vader, and the Death Star itself. That makes sense? I think it makes sense. It makes sense to me, but of course, I'm the one that's blubbering on about it. All right. So if we were going to look at the, I should probably make it'd be probably helpful to make we could make a couple of factions for the rebellion and the empire, but basically, right, the rebellion scheme is to destroy the Death Star. And when the movie starts, they've pretty much already accomplished step one's already been done in A New Hope. But they have to, but I guess it's not quite done yet. It's in progress. They have stolen the plans, but they have not gotten the plans out safely. They were trying to use Princess Leia and her diplomatic blah 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 and her diplomatic community to get the plans where they can analyze them. And of course, Vader decides to revoke her diplomatic immunity, and she then has to send it off with the droids in the little shuttle escape pod, which lands in on Tatooine or whatever, and then of course they get to Luke and blah 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 blah, right? All that stuff that's happening. The one's all about really almost the entire movie is this part right here, from stealing the plans, the end of stealing the plans to the analyzing, and then of course the final act is them launching the attack. But the weakness for their part, the Empire sends out their Star Destroyers. They send out Vader. They're canvassing space. And of course they end up trying to use the Death Star itself to just blow things up before things get out of hand. So there you have it. And the party, interacts with that however they want to. And then you can decide, you can use roles, whatever that, hey, without the party, maybe the rebellion is not able to get it. I mean, obviously without Luke and to a lesser extent Han and whatnot, their plan doesn't work. They would be stuck, right? So that's that. But we don't really have to worry about that because that's going to get established through play. But there you have a scheme example. Look at all that. This is maybe more orderly than I'm used to. So you're building all this stuff up. To kind of put a wrap on this, I'm sure we'll do more about this, but I want to kind of put just a wrap on it for now. Anyhow, you're gonna just do a briefest part on your setting. You just want an overview. You want to know what game you're playing. It's sci-fi, fantasy, whatever, right? You want to kind of get that down. You pick a tiny bit of your world. Really, like I said, 1 6 Mile Hex, I think will work. Lots of games before you scoff at it. You mentioned Caverns of Thracia a bunch of times. Keep on the Borderlands. I think Horror on the Hill also. They all take place within 1 hex. It's all right there. And that will give you plenty of time, plenty of action. And then while all that action is taking place, you can continue to build out things that are going on. You want to get a couple of factions going, and I'll probably do something more on factions. I've been writing up some tables, hopefully some simple tables, just to kind of get some factions. We'll look at Mouse Ritter, see the Mouse Ritter factions, and of course you need to come up with all these a little bit to do your campaign pitch. But get your little setting. Okay, then think about what's going on in this little hex. Who are the power players in this hex, and what do they want? What are their goals? And of course, I think you want them to be opposed to each other, which I don't think I put in here. Factions should be opposed to each other. You want them to be opposed. And this way, the party, there's something that opposition will put some dynamicism in there. The party, if they are, depending on if they're good versus evil, bad versus worse, whatever it is in the party, can choose how they want to interact. But that sets up the tensions that then the party gets to move in. If it's everyone's friends, then you're not gonna. It's it's gonna be it's boring. You want to have that tension. You want to have that element of something's in the air. The scheme, if you want to take it from one of these faction goals and to figure out like what is currently in play, and then what do they need to do to accomplish that, and then also what is the other faction doing to prevent them from doing it. We can write that out. That's going to be kind of the frame for what the party's stepping into. We went through the Star Wars example. All this stuff can inform your character backgrounds. This is probably the one that I would spend the least amount of work on when you're doing the campaign pitch. You really just kind of want to know generally who are they. In Star Wars, who's Luke? He's a what is he? He's a water farmer with a past. That's Luke, right? You're a right moisture farmer. He's a moisture farmer with a past and a gift. Moisture farmer with a past and a gift. That's it. Okay. Or if you wanted to be less specific and you wanted to say, hey, include other folks on Tatooine, or wherever, you can say, hey, you guys are all the settlers, disaffected sons and daughters of settlers who are itching to find adventure off world. Okay, boom. That's all you need, because you're going to feed that in the campaign pitch of, hey, who are you? You are, disaffected young adults on a backwater world itching for, a space adventure. Oh, okay, cool. You're going to come up with some locations, which is in your little adventure area, in your little 6 mile hex or space sector, or wherever you are. You want one that's kind of a refuge where you can rest and resupply. You want a lair, which is where one of the factions, at least one, because I was thinking also, like, one faction probably resides in the refuge, usually with the good guys. Oh, like good King Olaf. Well, his lair is basically the refuge. Doesn't have to be, but kind of simplifying things for your first sort of adventure, right? The keep, right? The refuge of the good guys, let's say, that they might not be good, whatever, is in the keep, is the keep. And then you've got the lair, which is where the other faction, or, like I said, is residing. You have your adventure location, aka the dungeon, but it doesn't have to be a dungeon. We came up with some examples. We came up with a couple of things you can check down on. And then if you get all that done, first go through very roughly, create your campaign pitch, throw your campaign pitch to your prospective players. If you get enough and you're like, hey, man, this game is a go, then you can go through and start to flesh these things out. And then once you've fleshed it out, you can start going through some of the finishing touches and extra questions we got to kind of hash things out. But I think this will put you in good stead. And I will flesh this out some more and maybe work up an example. We'll probably do more streams, but I'm glad that I feel like we got a good wrapping for at least the beginning of this process. As with all things, let me know what you think. Let me know how this works for you. Do you feel like there's things that I'm missing? Feel like something that could use more fleshing out explanation? Whatever. I'm here for you, but I have to go. I got to be somewhere else for someone else. So as I'm recording this on a Friday, have a great weekend. But if you watch or listen to this later, then enjoy the rest of your day, night, whenever you end up watching or listening to this. As always, game on. Talk to you later. Bye now.